But I think that it is much more difficult to get to the ordinary Africans, definitely much more difficult than in the industrialized countries, because most Africans are faced with poverty, they are faced with immediate needs, but it must reach the African leadership. And I was very happy to hear what the Prime Minister of Ethiopia said, and I'm quite sure that's the voice of the African Union. It is the leadership that must realize that if we do it differently, we are undermining our own future, and that's of our generations to come. Now, if we want to do that, that's up to us.
Okay, Chad Holiday, at a recent African Union summit, the president of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni, said that climate change is an act of aggression by the rich world against poor nations, and he said there may be a case for giving Africa some compensation in other developing countries. Is that something that you think is an idea you could run with?
I think we must find ways of taking these new technologies and transferring them very fast to Africa so they have a reason to adopt these. And so I think we've got to find mechanisms, and all part of whatever legislation we have here can find ways to do that. We're seeing that in pharmaceuticals today. We're finding ways to getting pharmaceuticals to Africa to help, and it's not destroying the existing markets. We can do the same thing here.
You agree with that, Mayor Bloomberg, that the clean technology that America's putting a lot of money into developing at the moment?
I think it's a mistake to think that for Africa or any other place to develop, they have to go through the same history that America and Western Europe went through. The technologies are different, and you can start out and come in at a different place in the development chain. Today, technology is available in many parts of the third world. Wasn't available before. Cell phones let you put in a phone system without all the infrastructure. Solar power and wind power lets you come in and start developing. We're still addicted to carbon fossil fuels. That's going to be true for a while. But if you build a power plant today, you don't build it with old technologies, you can build it with new technologies. And today we have medicines and a better understanding of the damage that we're doing, not just to the environment, but I always bring it much closer to home, the damage we're doing to ourselves, our lungs, the air our children breathe. And that, in the end, is what's selling. I thought President Clinton summed it up very well at the very beginning. There is the economics, there is what's right, and there's our health. And all of those things today are in the press, in our minds, understood better than ever before.
Okay, but President Clinton, I mean, this question of the trade-off between economic growth and trying to combat global warming, I mean, it's not something that anybody who is trying to run for office, for instance, could seriously give as a campaign message, is it? That there may be slower growth if we do this on global warming.
All right, now let's just look at that. In the United States, we've had a 40-year high in corporate profits this decade, and 5 years of productivity growth. We've had flat wages and rising poverty among working people. In the UK, you have about the same unemployment rate we do. You've had rising median wages and no increase in inequality. In Denmark, you've had rising median wages and an absolute decline in inequality. What is the difference? There's only one difference. We ran away from our obligations to deal with climate change. The UK is going to beat its Kyoto targets. They're going to meet them by 2010 and then surpass them. So you have more new jobs than we do and no increase in inequality. And Denmark grew its economy 50% with no increase in energy use and a decline in greenhouse gas emissions, and it's got the best performing economy of all. The evidence is on our side. People can repeat this all they want. Now, so
Denmark is a tiny country, though. It's not a big, major industrial country like America, though, is it? But what happens in smaller countries?
Let's take the 70s, Uganda. Let's take Uganda. Or
what about the United States? Because that's the area that I really wanted to ask
you
about.
Can you
compromise economic growth?
The Energy Department has a study which says that we have enough wind between the Texas Panhandle and the Canadian border with North Dakota to electrify America. We just have to redo the distribution. Now, we don't have to do that. My point is, we haven't even scratched the surface of what is possible. There is a study which said we know, let's take what we know. We know maximum energy efficiency is the low-hanging fruit with the highest return. You want to talk about the United States? Goldman Sachs, hardly a left-wing green group, right? Goldman Sachs was circulating a study last month which said if the U.S., China, India, and Russia, never mind clean energy, simply achieve the efficiency levels of Japan, it would reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 20%. No one disputes that that makes money.
But do you feel that you could have done more on climate change when you were in power?
Not after the Republicans took over Congress. They thought it was a communist plot. But let me just say what I did do. I did the Kyoto Accord and tried to pass it, and they voted against it, and so did the Democrats, by the way, at the time. And
well, it was, yeah,
everything I left in order when I left. Rules for appliance efficiencies, for greening federal buildings, and to have 20% of the federal fleet on alternative fuel vehicles by 25, and all those rules were repealed when I left office. We greened the White House and had the effect of taking 700,000, not the White House, larger complex, had the effect of taking 700,000 cars off the road. I don't make the laws. Everything I could do by executive authority, I did.
But as you said in your autobiography, My Life, you wanted to tackle climate change not through the use of taxes and regulation, but by giving market incentives for energy conservation, clean technology. So didn't you shirk perhaps the really bold step of trying to make the use of carbon much more expensive?
Did you pay any attention to the politics of the Congress when I was president?
I did. I did.
Are you familiar with Newt Gingrich and Tom DeLay?
I am totally familiar. I am totally familiar, but I'm just asking you that question. Would you have liked to have done that?
Absolutely.
You would have liked to have made the use of carbon very expensive?
I would have liked to have had a price on carbon. Let me remind you something. In 1993, 5 years before Kyoto, we passed the carbon tax in the House of Representatives that was defeated in the Senate. I now believe, contrary to most economists, however, that with oil at $80 and with the effects of coal evident, that if you can set up a market system that works, that is, if you get a good baseline, you can keep score, I think pricing carbon and having a trading system and a market mechanism is better than a carbon tax.
Chad Holliday, I mean, fundamentally, that's what you have to do, is make it expensive for business, industry and economies generally to run on carbon-based energy. You've got to make it expensive if you want to do it.
We believe you need a market-based mechanism to drive the best solutions. We've talked about them here. It's not in place today. The energy conservation the President's talked about has to be put in place. We shouldn't build a single other building without that. But without some more rules of the road, that's not going to happen. Let me move you to a slightly different point, because we've kind of bypassed...
No, I was just asking you how much pain business and industry could take if you had what we have in Europe, you know, various permits in order to use carbon, which is allocated
But Europe has produced more, I'm glad you mentioned that. Europe has produced more jobs than the United States.